Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Post. Today, I have a very special guest. I'm joined by my talented colleague, Jennifer Gutman, who has built employee advocacy programs from the ground up for hundreds of B2B organizations, from startup all the way to enterprise. If you're looking to launch an employee advocacy program from scratch, you are in the right place. Today, we're here to run you through how to launch a pilot program in 10 days to get your team ready and excited to advocate for your brand on social media. The results will then help you get that buy-in from management and prove the impact of advocacy on your organization. Whether your employees are social media newbies or seasoned pros, this episode will help you cover all the essential steps. So let's jump right in. Jen, are you ready to go behind the post with me?
Am I ever?
I'm so excited to have you here. This is a collab waiting to happen, but let's start from the very, very top. Before our 10-day pilot rollout plan, why should B2B brands invest in employee advocacy and what value does it bring to the organization?
Woo, Alina. So I think it's a great first question. And truth be told, I think that we could probably do an entire episode alone on just the topic of the power of employee advocacy, especially for B2B brands. I think employees set aside an actual running of a program, right? Employees need to be able to advocate for themselves on social media. It's kind of the unspoken career line item description in any job description you're going to come across. And I think when you think about B2B brands investing in employee advocacy, it's really about investing in the employees, right? So we're marketers. I know many of our listeners listening, right? We're all marketers. We're all in the same boat, and we're always trying to get creative with how we can distribute our content, right? And especially when it comes to social media, we're always looking how we can increase reach and improve brand perception. And right, that's really for us, it's quite strategic. So from a marketing perspective, B2B brands should have employee advocacy as a core tactic, I think, in any marketing department. And I think as we head into 2025, we're going to see this anchoring many marketing strategies. And I think you have to look at the investment of employee advocacy with two lenses, right? The first one is the marketing point of view and the value it brings to a marketing team by being able to effectively distribute your content to the right people at the right time, right? That whole marketing message, marketing 101. But then if you shift to the employees, right, what we know is that B2B brands, when we go out on our corporate feeds and we start creating content, we have X amount of reach, right? And we know that today people trust people. It's not to say that they don't trust brands, but we know from a lot of research, we know, head over, ask ChatGPT, Google, we know that the power is in the people. So in order for an employee advocacy program to be successful and to show the value, you need to really get your advocates amped up, right? And understanding their power that when they take these messages, these pieces of content and amplify it on their own social profiles, and we're giving our advocates a voice, right? It comes back to marketing to helping us reach more people and help our content be seen by the right eyes. But it also positions our employees as thought leaders. And I think that the why behind the advocacy program is just as important as the launch itself. So for anybody, right, about to pilot, about to launch, or even to revitalize, as you're thinking, okay, how are we going to revitalize? How are we going to bring this program to life? I would always be transparent with your employees and make sure that your employees know the why, both the marketing why, the employee why, and the why behind you're going to run this program. And it's going to set you up for success in the long run.
Absolutely. And having them understand these benefits for the company and for themselves will make them more enthusiastic and make them feel more part of the overall mission together. Okay, so now we're at day one and it's all about getting your employees on board. So how can marketing teams effectively sell employees on the idea of becoming advocates for the brand?
So, first, I have to say, if you've made it to day one, congratulations. There's so much planning. There are so many steps that go into launching an advocacy program. So, you've selected your platform. Hopefully, it's Oktopost, right? But you've thought this through. You think through who you want in this program. You've sold and you've received the buy-in of the stakeholders. So congratulations. So my first piece of advice is don't panic. Like, you're sitting at your computer and there are so many things that need to be done in preparation for this launch. So first thing, don't panic. The second thing when it comes to, selling the employees on the idea of becoming advocates, and I put the selling in air quotes, is that I think when you do it right, it's not even it's a sell. It's a natural, wanting to be part of something bigger than they are, contribute to the brand that they love, and give them an opportunity to be those thought leaders and work on their personal brand. But I would say there are a few steps to think about. So one of the most overlooked steps, I think, of gaining that buy-in from your employees is transparency. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean that you need to go and, tell your whole organization what numbers you necessarily need to hit or what your, super strategic goals are or, your super refined content strategy. But I would say, again, as I mentioned before, talk about the why, but also be mindful of how you're going to internally communicate leading up to the launch. And I think that this is a very overlooked step because everybody's so excited to start inviting advocates and having them share content and, do the kickoff. But there are some important strategic, I would say, emails, Slack channels, if you're using Teams, messages that you can send out prior to start getting people excited. So, for example, in an internal comms plan, you're going to want to think through how many days before I launch the program am I going to want to let people know about this program? How have I selected these individuals? Do I want to let people know why they were selected and how they were selected? And the other piece in this time of like internal comms, I would recommend a 2-week window. So if for example, your launch date is going to be, let's say, I don't know, give a random date, January 1st, right? So 2 weeks prior, what you're going to want to do is start sending these internal comms. So you're going to want to invite all the advocates to maybe an internal training or kickoff call. You're going to want to send them an email letting them know that they're going to receive this invitation or that they've been selected. You can keep it kind of cryptic in the beginning because, again, I think this builds suspense. Like, oh, what is this? This is exciting. You can, let them know maybe there's going to be a raffle or drawing during the kickoff or something exciting that they're going to learn more about on that kickoff, but they have to attend that kickoff. But I think that internal comms plan is key. And that's also as you maintain the program, right? How are you going to keep advocates updated? I know, Alina, you and I were speaking last week about the idea of an employee advocacy newsletter, right? That's an internal comm that's often overlooked, that often does wonders to keep people engaged. So all of that, don't overlook and think through day one. I would say that's the most important. And then also in day one, as you start thinking about how to gain the buy-in, I would also think about different ways you can create, dare I say this, what is it, like Gen Z term, FOMO, right? Like fear of missing out. So I know some really successful launches that we've seen when an employee has been selected to join the program, cupcakes were sent to their desk. And so you have, the whole office looking where these cupcakes are going to and wondering how can I get it to. I heard there's also a program that I've heard running that they give hoodies, which I think is a great idea. Who doesn't love a hoodie? But when you get initiated, if you will, into the advocacy program, again, a hoodie is sent your way and you can wear the hoodies and people want these hoodies and they're very unique hoodies that when you're part of this advocacy program, this is the swag that you get. And that does seem to work wonders. So I would think that through. Day one. And again, I don't necessarily think the rewards or the recognition needs to be in the form of gift cards. It can be something as simple as that recognition or bragging rights or a certificate that you've, printed off or digitally created, but something that's going to set these ambassadors or advocates apart from the ones who are not. Because as you think of scaling this program, right, you want to keep it in a way that, okay, these are the chosen ones, if you will. And as the program grows, you want people not in the program to want to be in the program. So what can you do, day one to get this moving?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense. And also it creates, as you said, that sense of FOMO. So everyone wants to be a part of your program so your program can grow.
Yeah.
So having enthusiastic advocates is really, really important to scaling the program afterwards. So now that you've invited your advocates, the selected ones for the pilot, what should an introduction to the company's social media strategy look like for these employees in terms of explaining the target audience and who they want to reach online?
I would say the more information you can share, the better regarding what we as marketers take for granted. meaning, right? We throw around the term like ICP, target audience. Um, what other terms like off the top of my head do we throw around that maybe the average seller or the average HR professional or the average implementation manager is not going to speak the marketing lingo. So I would break it down for them. I would help them understand these terms that we take for granted, and I would even go as far as to understand, right, or help them understand rather, on LinkedIn, the different networks, what you're aiming to reach, right? So we know for B2B organizations that LinkedIn is the go-to oftentimes for our social strategy. And I would take a moment to explain why LinkedIn, or maybe give them a little history of the background of, how LinkedIn came to be. If you're running a Facebook strategy, Instagram strategy, X strategy, right? Walk them through it, let them know what channels that you're participating and building your strategy on, what channels they can participate on. But I would make sure that they know, right, the purpose of the channels, the tone of each channels, not only the tone that your brand is taking on these channels, but in general, right? We know, for example, and we probably take for granted that on LinkedIn, you can tell these novels in a post. And if you head over to X, you get a certain amount of characters. I would say more or less today, when I lead trainings, uh, majority of the advocates that I train are familiar with social media. I think social media has evolved so much so that, right, if you say LinkedIn, if you say X, your employees will know what this means. But I will caution that not all employees may understand, the why behind each platform. And so I always like to give myself a challenge and try to find what I call social curmudgeons before I do a training or a kickoff. And I try to get inside of their head, right? Because the social enthusiasts in your program, which are the ones that, hopefully you've grabbed first to be a part of this program, you've done your research, just to understand who are your socially savvy colleagues to get them part of that program. But I would head over to those what I call social curmudgeons, the ones who are less likely to want to jump into social media and sharing posts and try to get inside of their head, see what they know. And then that way, when I put together my introduction to the company's social media strategy, obviously I know my strategy back, forwards, and front from a marketing perspective, but I can also come at it from a point of view that I know where my advocates are from I'll call it, right, the weakest knowledge up until the strongest knowledge. And in that first kickoff, I try to throw in something for everyone. And then as your program is going and gaining momentum and you start to see who's logging in, who's sharing, who's at the top of a leaderboard, for example, then you can create maybe sessions per, okay, these colleagues are sharing less. Let me understand why and create a session for them. But I think in that first one, you kind of want to find a hook. My grandfather had told me something that I feel has transpired into my career, as a social media enthusiast. But it was always try to find something in common, even when you don't think you have anything in common with someone. And the reason why I apply that to every program of advocacy that I launch is because when you're launching an employee advocacy program, you're talking to an array of different personalities. Everybody in your program was hired for different skill sets, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So you need to get into the shoes of every persona, if you will, employee that you have to find something that's going to connect with them. And I think specifically for LinkedIn, you're going to want to include, right, what they can expect from your brand on your feed, and who you're targeting, because it will just help them understand when they're creating their own content, hopefully, and when they're sharing content, what they need to do to help you reach your goals.
Yeah, we're kind of segueing into the next question I want to ask you quite nicely. You're talking about sessions and what you need to teach and train for your advocates. So the next few days really of the program, you're going to spend time training them and making sure they understand everything, their profiles are optimized. And as you said before, we're spanning over many different departments that might not know what KPIs are, or even impressions and reach. They might not understand what that means. So because employee advocacy pulls advocates from many different departments, including those that haven't had much to do with social media before, how can marketers help their employees build these practical social media skills?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that this is probably the part of an advocacy program that I love the most and I hate the most. And I'll get into why, right? But when you are deciding which employees to include, how to get them excited to take part in it, how to select the right group of team members to help plow your program forward, I think what's important to to share in these trainings, I always break it down into like there's all of my trainings. And if anyone listening in has been in my trainings, you're probably nodding your head like, yes, this is what we went through. There's usually three components of a training that I always include. The first is always the why. Why are we in this room? Why are we having this discussion? Right? Why employee advocacy? The second piece of my trainings are what. So what are we going to share? What are we going to use to share it? And the last piece of it is how, right? So how are we sharing? How does it work? How can I do it? How can I stay involved? And then I end with best practices, in the how. So those best practice was what I would think about is, all right, posting cadences, finding the rhythms of your employees. So help your advocates understand that we're not asking them to go on social media and suddenly become a content creator and change their day job and don't, make them nervous because I think a lot of times when you roll out one of these programs, you want to, I always call it the ripple effect, right? So if you take a stone and you throw it into the water, that first layer is the strongest ring. So when you think about the advocates that you want to have in your program, think about that first layer in a ripple. Those are your social enthusiasts. Chances are your social enthusiasts, they're already on LinkedIn, they're already creating their own content, they're already posting, they're probably pretty savvy when it comes to social media. You're not going to necessarily need to do much training for them on the how, maybe a little bit on the why, but once you give them the tools, they're going to be able to take their skills and, plow forward. And then when you think about a ripple and kind of that second layer, the ripple gets a little bit less noticeable as it goes out, but it's still there. And those are your, what I call maybe your average Joes or, the average kind of employee advocate. And I usually give those, I always include for the trainings for the average Joes, all right, what does it mean to be a thought leader? What does it mean? How do I become one? What do I need to do, right? Is that posting once a day, 5 times a day? So on LinkedIn, for example, what would be best practices for LinkedIn? Explain how X works, how it's a fast moving social network, and give them a way to be able to kind of understand how they can become the ambassador that you want them to be, combining ambassador and advocacy in one word. But give them the tools to basically build what you need them to build, and they will get there slowly but surely. And then, of course, with the social curmudgeons, I always actually challenge myself, and I always pick one or two social curmudgeons to join me in the first rollout, just to understand and keep a pulse check on when I need to roll this out to the rest of the organization. What may some of the roadblocks be, because those social curmudgeons can actually give you some pretty nice insight into like things you're not thinking about. So for example, maybe a survey and sending out before you run the pilot, right? We talked about those internal comms. A survey could be part of that internal communication. Like, hey, I'm sending the survey before this kickoff. And in that survey, you're going to want to include what do you know about LinkedIn? Or what do you want to know about LinkedIn? Or are you actively posting? What do you like to share? What do you want to share? And try to get inside of their heads. And these surveys, by the way, I send out every quarter with different questions. But it just helps me understand where I am in the program. Social media trends move fast. And so we want to stay on top of them. And so do our employees of what they want to share on LinkedIn. So I would keep track with the survey.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big points you're saying is communication and keeping the door open. And I think that's the most important thing, especially with a pilot program where it's not a point where it's rolled out to the whole organization, that people are starting to get into the rhythm of it, as you're saying, with the ripple effect. So keeping the doors open and being there to communicate, being there to sit with someone to write a social post to help them, show them how to personalize a post, show them how they can show off their personal voice and personal brand is something very important for this stage. There's one question I want to tag on quickly to the training. A lot of companies are doing this in maybe a more of a regulated industry, and there's like compliance regulations they need to keep on track with. So if somebody is listening who is part of that and wants to roll out a pilot program, how can they communicate their company policy on social media to the rest of their advocates?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, everyone I speak to is always like, oh yeah, probably this is more important for regulated industries, the social media policy. And, they're not wrong, but I think putting together a social media policy for an advocacy program, it's actually best practice across any industry. And I'll tell you why. There's the saying that we all know, right? Knowledge is power. Well, I also think knowledge is confidence. And one of the biggest challenges in an advocacy program, I think, that I've experienced when I've trained advocates is a lack of confidence on social media, right? They feel either they're not marketers, so what they're going to say is never going to be as good as what the marketing team says. So that sometimes can stop them from wanting to create their own content. Fear of putting their own thoughts out there and maybe nervous that they're going to say something wrong and get in trouble. And so when I say knowledge is confidence with your social media policy, if you're in a regulated industry, chances are you're going to have very strict policies on a lot of different things. So yes, you're going to want to be transparent about what your social media policy is. And I know today, many of us, when we join an organization, we're signing social media policies there. This is a great time to just remind or reintroduce in your kickoff where they can find the social media policy that they find or sign, sorry, or review anything that you think would be relevant to keep your advocates with high confidence when participating. But for those who aren't in a regulated industry, I wouldn't overlook putting together a social media policy. I think what you can do is make the language less intimidating, right? So when you hear, oh, social media policy, suddenly maybe it's scary for some, like, oh my gosh, not going to post at all. Don't want to get in trouble with the policy. Posting nothing is better than posting something that could get in trouble. And that's what goes through a lot of minds. But if you have a social media policy in place and you make it fun or you make it in the same tone of your program, this can do wonders for the confidence of your advocates to truly understand what they need to post. And I once saw I thought it was the best social media policy for an advocacy program. They called it a traffic light policy, which I thought was brilliant. They created a slide with a traffic light, and they explained that posting on social media for them, their policy is a traffic light. And they gave, for example, in their kickoff, what is green content, right? If you go through the colors of the traffic light, what is green content? And they gave actual examples of what green content is, right? It had a hook. You created it yourself. You shared in this way. You used hashtags. You added mentions. This is green content. Anything you shared like this, you're good to go. Then, yellow, orange, maybe debated what parts of the world you live in, but that yellow traffic light was kind of the yield. So maybe that's I know we encourage a lot of our advocates to create their own content, be champions, put things in their own tone of voice. So we would create in that yellow area some samples of posts that maybe that would make them a little nervous to share, but it's still okay to share. Or right, if they're not certain if this is okay content to share, they have this thought, who in the social media team can they talk to, or what suggestions can they give, right? And put that all in the yellow category. And then the red would be, for example, posts that are absolutely, never allowed. So for example, in that red quarter category, maybe you want to mention, do not tag our competitors, or, I think a basic one is, no curse words, or no politics. Like you can go through and kind of think through what would make sense for your brand. But I think putting it in that creative, visual, green, yellow, red kind of policy like, you know, uh, presentation or when you give it, it gives confidence to your advocates that there's a very clear like what's expected and what would get them in trouble versus what won't get them in trouble. And it can actually help you in the long run make sure advocates are sharing. Because again, when I've surveyed advocates in many different programs across many sizes of organizations, one of the biggest things I constantly hear is, well, I am not comfortable sharing because I'm not a marketer, or I don't want to get in trouble and I don't know what I can and cannot say. So one, an advocacy program in general is going to help you with that problem because you're going to be able to provide your advocates with, conversion ready on brand content that they can literally just click share and have confidence. But when you start taking your program to the next level and you start to work with your champions and your social enthusiasts, and you're going to want them to create, and put things in their own voice, I think this is where that comes in very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great system. And it's very easy to remember, easy to visualize, and it's a really good way to resonate with your advocates. So coming up to the end of our 10 days of our pilot program, if you are using a tool, it's really important within these 10 days is to train your advocates on the tool. So how can marketers ensure that their employees are using their advocacy program effectively? What do they need to teach them? What do they need to leave them with?
Sure. So I once heard a great way to break down how we do things in marketing and in an organization, right? When we think about digital transformation, there's often these three terms that go with it, right? Skill set, mindset, and tool set. So I like to apply that to advocacy program
I love
rollouts, by the way, as well, right? So the first step is making sure all your advocates have the right mindset, that we're doing this to build personal brand. We're doing this to help our brand, get into the right our messages get into the right people at the right time, right? The skill set in our kickoff and throughout the pilot program, we are giving our advocates the skill set to be those social ninjas that they need to be to help us succeed in launching and maintaining this program. Now, the last piece is the tool set. And I think that's where a lot of us, it takes a little bit of work because it's about creating a habit with the new tool set. So what do we know? And in as a modern day marketer, is that whether you're marketing, sales, customer success, HR, we're using tons of tools every day. So for your advocacy tool, you're going to want it to stand out, be easy to use, and you're going to want to make sure that you make it a habit. So in your training, I would give examples, right? You come into work, into the office, you have a cup of coffee, you check your, advocacy board, or you're in your commute, you download the app and you check your advocacy board to see if there's content to sharing, but help them find their rhythm on the tool that you're using. You're going to, of course, want to include a demo of how to use the tool, but I wouldn't go into every nook and cranny on that first kickoff. Get to the basics, right? Make it super simple. The, 6 steps or the 3 steps or the 4 steps or the one-click thing you need to know and walk away from this session to be able to share content to keep it easy. Goes a long way. What I know back in like second or third grade math, we had like this system called Kiss It, which was like keep it simple, silly. Maybe some people know it as keep it simple,
I haven't
stupid,
heard of that,
right?
but I love that.
Okay. So there's something called KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, but we'll say silly. And essentially, what it is like when you're doing things in life, you want to kiss it, you want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing with an advocacy tool. You want to find one that is simple to use, and you want to make sure that your advocates find it simple, that it's not like cluttery, that it's not going to overwhelm them. And then create the habit, an easy habit to be able to go into that platform on a daily basis and make it part of their daily rhythm. I think that is super key. And if you can connect it to other channels like Salesforce, or Slack or Teams, right, to make sure you're where your advocates are, that is also going to help. So does that help answer your question?
Absolutely. I think, as you said, to keep it simple, they just need to know how to share. And then over time, you can build up on the skills and go into more intricate details of the tool. So at this point now, our pilot is launched. We've done the 10 days. Well done if you've made it this far. But our job as marketers, it doesn't stop here. So what kind of support and content should we be giving to our employees to keep them engaged in advocacy?
Yeah, so this is this is something I think any advocacy program leader struggles with. I'm on the struggle bus sometimes, like, to be super transparent on how we can keep our advocates engaged. So the first thing I think we can think about is how do the minds, I know it sounds like a little maybe creepy, but how do the minds of our advocates work? So if your sales members are on the board, if your salespeople are on the advocacy program, how do their minds work? How do they think, right? They probably think in verticals. They probably think in regions. They probably think in maybe titles, whoever their target accounts, right? How do they think? So you can create topics or you can create categories of content for the way that they think, and then remind them to jump on the board every now and then, to share. The other piece I would think about when launching in these 10 days is, do you have a new asset that you want to promote, or a webinar or something downloadable or, registerable, if you will, for your advocates to share? Because when you give that action item, like I prior to marketing, I was in sales. So my head is constantly in action items. But I find when you roll out a program and you can finish that training or you can finish that pilot with an action item or call to action, as us marketers like to call it, right? You give them that challenge, or you give them that reason to go into the platform. So my favorite is trying to, and it's not always doable, but it's been pretty good so far. But my favorite is trying to say, okay, we have a webinar coming up. Alina, when's our next webinar? December
On the 4th.
December 4th, right? So you may
Yeah.
or may not have noticed, right, that I've started to say, okay, we're going to be sharing this webinar, and you start dropping, right? There will be signs. So you're going to want to hop into the advocacy board for this content, or we send out alerts around webinar time because we know that salespeople know that when they share a webinar, that they're going to get more engagement on it. They know that they could get more leads from it. Of course, that's a great thing, and we can see all of that information, which is fantastic from an advocacy program. So when you start giving them a call to action, it makes them want to head in more. So I would definitely like ebooks, white papers, all those B2B golden assets. And then the other piece I would do on a regular basis is find a channel of communication for all advocates, whether it's a Slack channel, Teams, a newsletter, and I would actually share the successes internally of the advocates. So for it, it doesn't have to be like fancy schmancy when you're just starting out, but like a screenshot of the leaderboard and a dashboard of engagement from specific employees could be really encouraging for other advocates to share. Another idea to keep this going is you could say, okay, I have, 200 advocates in my program, and once a month, I'm going to interview one advocate, and I'm going to ask them, how did you do what you did? What do you like to share? And I'm going to internally share that interview. If you have town hall meetings, if you have all hands, try to find those opportunities where the company is all together to showcase those advocates and to showcase your program. Because kind of bringing it back full circle to the first question you asked was that it allows us then to prove the value, it's almost like we're marketing. It's a product or a service on its own, right? Employee advocacy. But how can we constantly get our program visible? And then the last piece, right, in terms of the kind of support content and content that we should be helping our employees, I would reach out to your HR departments if you haven't already and see how you can get your program part of the onboarding process for new employees because it makes your job and their job much easier. I know HR professionals, when they're looking to onboard an employee, they're looking to make sure that the employee has everything that they need to succeed. Advocacy is one of those things that an employee is going to need to succeed. So if you can get this program as part of the onboarding, I think it also helps because any new employees that you have joining the organization, you can give them a training, but you can always re-invite anyone else from the organization to join. So that's ongoing. And then I think the other piece is, giving the employees the ability to know how they can suggest content, how they can feel empowered to give those suggestions and feedback and that you're taking them seriously. And then, of course, I think the feedback. So the surveys I know we mentioned earlier on, sometimes one-on-one pings work great, or maybe, those water cooler talks by the kitchen and just, hey, how's the advocacy program? What do you like about it? And celebrating those wins.
Absolutely. As you're saying, it's so important to keep the communication and the ongoing support. That's the phase you're in now. And even if you have an advocacy program running for 10 years, 5 years, however long it is, you still need to be checking in with them. But with the pilot and to really get it off the ground, it's the most crucial time to celebrate those wins, celebrate your advocates, post, as you said, in a Slack channel, look at this post, it did amazing, to get everyone excited about it and keep the momentum going. One of the most important things about a pilot program is you're doing this to prove that it's worth it and that you should roll it out to your organization. So to do that, you want to know the results of it. That's a really crucial part of the pilot program. So how can marketers measure the success of the pilot? What should they be looking for? And how should they take it to management?
Yeah, I think this is the best question. It's also the hardest to answer. Because when you are looking to say, okay, what defines a successful program, only your organization will be able to answer that, right? So is a successful program, I think for most marketers, right, our job is to really contribute to lead generation and grow brand awareness, right? It's like at the end of the day, hello marketing. So from a marketing perspective, I think those two metrics to be able to prove, right, that we are either contributing to lead generation or growing brand awareness, those are two metrics that we should include in the pilot. Now, I think it's important to set the stage for the pilot. This is a short amount of time that we're running this program. So it's almost like here we are, you have to kind of position as one of the classic back of the napkin ROIs. Like here we are today, X amount of advocates, here's what we did. And you can look at, impressions, I think is a great thing to look at. You can look at link clicks. Again, if you're measuring website traffic, but take a look at how this program can contribute to what and how you're measuring the rest of your marketing activity. And then the second piece, when we're looking at lead generation and, social selling and how is an advocacy program going to help contribute for your SDRs, for your AEs? Where is social, falling in that sales cycle? And being able to track that to say, hey, social had a touch point in this specific deal. And let me show you where, and let me show you why, and let me show you how, and let me show you who, right? Which advocate contributed to that. I think also from a nurturing perspective, an advocacy program can really help you understand. A lot of questions often come up with social media, right? What do all of these social metrics mean? These vanity metrics, right? So I have 100 likes. This advocate got 100 likes on their post. What does that mean? That's great for them, but how does it help the business? Well, I think maybe building out some nurture flows with the content and the information that you've gained from what your advocate audience likes to engage with can help you create better and stronger marketing campaigns and content even. So I would show that piece as well. But at the end of the day, like ROI is all about, coming down to like, okay, what's the bottom line on the business? And I think what's interesting is, again, there's this whole great debate, and this can be an episode in itself between paid and organic social media. So I would also take a look, maybe if you can get some numbers, and anyone listening in, we have an ROI calculator that we use, and we can help you with this. But you can take a look and say, okay, here's what I'm spending on paid, pay per click, and here's what we would spend in an advocacy program. And we do a comparison side by side, and you can show them how much money that they're either saving by taking this to an organic place to help you grow your reach, or right, finding the right balance between, paid and organic. I think that would be important to take a look at. And then, of course, just educating about the power of networks and personal branding. I think what's interesting now is there's always this conversation happening where we see today that when CEOs and CMOs and VPs post, that a lot of times their networks, their reach, their engagement goes far, far greater than a brand. So the question today too is, right, who do you include in your advocacy program? So what I would also include when you're trying to get that buy-in or, prove justification in these 10 days, take time and think about who you're putting in your program. So I usually call this the advocacy audit. And I will take, again, coming from organizations that are quite large, you don't need to put, all 5,000 employees in this audit. But I would think through who you would want to incorporate in that first 100, in that first 50, in that first 200. Because when you think through strategically who you're going to have in your pilot program, those are the people that are going to help you prove the value of the program fast, because that's what you need, right? A pilot is a short time to prove something. So you want to pick the right people. And I usually look for people who are already active on social media. I take a look on LinkedIn to see how many followers they have, right? Because I know that at the end of the day, after I've run my pilot and I'm looking at the numbers, if I am going to include someone who has, 1,000 followers versus someone who has 10,000 followers, the person with 10,000 followers is going to help my program faster. So for the pilot, find those specific individuals who are already doing it well, already have some sort of following, and open, and understand social. And then as you roll out, when you think about that ripple, then that's when you can go back and grab, the smaller cadres. I would also think through which executives do you want on board. I know one system that works quite well with executives is, again, we run into the same problems. They're busy. Maybe they have ghostwriters writing for them, or maybe they want to be part of the advocacy program, but they're not quite sure exactly which approach to take. I would see who you want to be ghostwriting for, see who you want to be part of your program, and then match those individuals up with, social media buddies, if you will, and help guide their own personal brand strategy. They're going to depend on you as the marketing team. Our advocates look to us as that North Star and how we're doing it right. So put yourself out there. And then I think the other piece of buy-in, again, is really coming down to making sure that your program is ROI positive. And I think you'll see pretty fast if you do it right in 10 days that the sky is the limit. It's quite impressive of what advocates can do when given the right tools with the right skill set and mindset to help amplify our brand forward.
Yeah, definitely. And as you're saying, everything is so important. And it really comes down to the people that you choose at the beginning, because that's what's going to help you make those impactful results fast and then move over to being able to roll it out to the wider organization when you get the buy-in for it. As I said at the beginning, you've helped so many companies launch employee advocacy programs from the ground up. So the last question I want to ask you, what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way? Are there any quick wins you can leave our audience with, or mistakes that you've learned the hard way and you've come out the other side that have been so valuable for you when it comes to employee advocacy?
Yes, yes, there are many. I need a whole other episode for that specific question, but I'll share a few. So the first thing is try always to jump on to something that already exists. So, as I mentioned before, right? You have a town hall coming up. Be fearless. Go find the organizer of the town hall and hey, I want to present my advocacy program, my best practices, my top advocates. I want to talk about this program. Be loud, be proud. Go find those programs that already exist. You have a sales kickoff coming up. Get someone from marketing in that sales kickoff to talk about your advocacy program and why joining it is the absolute best thing. Town hall, all hands, any one of those types of meetings. You have weekly recurring meetings. Another kind of hack or trick that I've used, right? I, as a marketer, sometimes live on Marketer's Island, and we're always trying to bridge the gap with sales, but sometimes, right, it just happens. So what I like to do is I like to find my sales counterparts who can be my ambassadors and get and basically speak on my behalf to their teams, right? So I know who are the leaders in those teams, and I know that when that leader says something, their team is going to be eager to follow suit. So find those people and have them also advocating for your program. I think that's something that I learned, I wouldn't say the hard way, but it took me some time to figure out. So lean on the leaders. I would also say don't underestimate the power of the survey. It seems so silly to send this survey out to your employees and like ask these questions, but what I found is that trust goes a long way. And if employees give you feedback in the survey and you can implement one or two pieces of their feedback immediately, suddenly you're like, they feel, oh, Jen's listening, or the program leader is listening. I want to be part of this program. They get me, and you'll see that the shares go up. I would also say, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I think when you're looking at your advocate metrics and you're looking, just prepare yourself that the program will ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Do not panic when you see that engagement is starting to dip, but rather use it as an opportunity to put some cool initiative, program, game, incentive, something, a webinar, something creative that can drive the engagement back up. And that this is a completely normal part of any advocacy program, that it is going to ebb and flow. And as long as you understand the patterns and how to pick up a dry spell, if you will, that's the most important thing. And the last thing I'll share about the what I wish I would have known. I'm a quite enthusiastic person, and sometimes,
It's shining through on
sometimes
this episode.
I would say that when it comes to advocacy, it's such an exciting initiative, and it's fun, and I it's fun to lead, it's fun to do, but not everyone is going to feel the same. And that's also okay, even though like I like don't like I fall off my chair because I don't understand how, like, here's this amazing program that you can be your own thought leader, how incredible is this, right? Not everybody is going to be excited about this, and I think that it's important to set that expectation that not everybody is going to be, tooting the advocacy horns from the start. And I think that just set yourself up knowing that you're going to have social curmudgeons and that that's okay, and that your job isn't to turn everybody into, a super uh
Superstar.
social enthusiast brand ambassador from day one. but that the small wins, the 1% gains, the 1% improvements each day in this program go such a long way. And I think if you are measuring, let's say on adoption of the program, or you are measuring on, how many ambassadors you're truly turning into brand evangelists, I think that's the biggest satisfaction that I have is when I see advocates in any program who maybe started with a threshold of sharing, once or twice a month, and then you see them on social media getting the hang of it and being proud to share, taking risks, and you've turned them into what you define as a brand evangelist. I think that's the true power of an employee advocacy program leader.
Absolutely. And we always say this at Octopost. I feel like we've taken our conversations from the marketing room and put it out here and behind the post, which is so fun. Is that advocacy is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that is something so important to highlight. It's going to take time sometimes, and that is okay. It doesn't happen overnight, which I think a lot of people don't realize. So I think that's also really important to include. But with that, Jen, thank you so much for joining me. For everyone listening, no matter how long you want to run your pilot program for, these are the 10 days to really get it off the ground. Hopefully we've given you a lot of information and a lot of stuff that you can go take back, write down, and use for your own pilot program. So Jen, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. And I'll just add if anybody wants to connect, if anybody listening in, you want to talk advocacy, literally anything when it comes to employee advocacy, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to write into Alina or myself at Oktopost. We literally love living and breathing advocacy every single day, and we'd love to connect with you.
For sure. The conversation for us is never over. So just like that.
Never.